And joining us live in studio, Professor Keith Angle, CEO of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals. And we have Luther Lebelo, Reserve Bank, or rather the South African Revenue Service Group Executive Employee Relations. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. Maybe I'm prophesying that you might just relocate to another government entity. Good evening, and congratulations are in order. Let's just start with the attributes, because we know that you come from a cloud of suspicion and also the allegation of underperformance because of leadership deficits there, but you have a different story to tell with these numbers. The numbers don't lie.
Yeah, we always knew that when the smokes and mirrors have been casted, the numbers will always tell the true story. And we've been very consistent that we are doing the best and we are competing with the best in the world. And the numbers shows that. And we're even arguing now that if you look at our tax to GDP ratio of 26%, is a cream. You always get it to, you get it from countries that are far more mature than ours. If you look at our rate of revenue, the tax revenue is quite high. So I think this continues to demystify the noise that being made in the space for other reasons than the facts that are before us. So we're very excited that the numbers confirms that SARS as an institution in the last 10 years has been growing.
Can we say that this is not a small feat, Professor Angle, in the sense that we do have these perennial socio-economic challenges, unemployment, the levels of poverty, inequality also increasing, and yet the Revenue Service is able to achieve its target of over 1 trillion per annum? No, look,
the Revenue Service overall is doing well. Right now we're having a little bit of war of narratives that's going on, so there is a war of narratives that are going on. But setting that aside, overall the Revenue Service has done quite well over a 10-year period. Now, the one thing I do question the number of the 10 years is how much of that is inflation. If the revenue is doubled, the economy didn't double. So sometimes we have to be careful about inflationary adjusted numbers. But the bottom line is overall revenue collections are quite good. But there's this little story even Sars is saying about tax morality. Now, I'm not sure also whether it's tax morality or falling economy. And one of the numbers that we don't really examine very well is the revenue buoyancy number. The fact is that we seem to tie growth exactly to revenue, and those changes in growth may not have an exact correlation. So I'm a little bit worried that are we really analyzing statistics well enough to give us the proper narrative?
Yeah, but this is what the Finance Minister alluded to in the concerns that there will be a shortfall of 50 billion rand, and not necessarily because of the operations at SARS or its ability to collect revenue. It does have to do with external factors around the slow economic growth. Is there a relationship, in your view, why these kind of projections are made that, hey, look out, there's going to be a shortfall and this is largely due to SARS, as opposed to taking into account all these other variables?
Yes, it's a simple analysis. So a committee sits, led by National Treasury, SARS and the Reserve Bank, and they make a 3-year projection. So they project that the economy is going to grow in this fashion in the next 3 years. And on the basis of that, they set targets. So it makes sense that if, let's use the current example. They said it was projected that the economy is going to grow by 1.3%, and therefore the target of 1265 trillion was put. Now we know that the economy grew by, or going to grow by 0.7, and inevitably you reduce your target because we're getting the revenue from the economy, from the GDP. Therefore, you reduce your target. I mean, in 2009, when the recession came, and the recession was unexpected, they had to cut the tax by 60 billion rand because what was projected to be growth 3 years in advance didn't anticipate the recession. And that is where we are now. And all the economic factors, if you look at them, they're showing left. And I hear all the time, the media will say, no, SARS is saying it's because of the economy. It's not SARS. The minister in his budget speech, he's the one who said, it's the economy, that's why I'm cutting this money. And he even showed which areas of the economy that is not growing. So we're just regurgitating what the minister said in there. But are there areas of improvement? Like any other organization, there are areas of improvement. There are areas where we know that we need to work harder and more harder to even do more. But to attribute this to SARS is really disingenuous.
Well, we'll come to the attributes, as to what led to you achieving your targets. But I just want to go back to how then do we correlate the projected shortfall of 50 billion rand and then taking into account that it's not necessarily a deficit. This is essentially adjusting the figures based on what the conditions are.
Yeah. Let me say this. I mean, the Revenue Service has to live with the issue of these targets. They live with targets. Now, the problem is when Treasury sets them, they're not automatically adjusted. The bottom line is if the economy drops, the target should automatically drop. The only time they adjust the target is when it's a discretionary decision by the minister and the Treasury. So you have a target, economy's dropping, and then all of a sudden you're going to miss the number. The number should always be automatically adjusting, and that puts the SARS under a very unfair pressure and also a very bad outlook, because if the economy is dropping, you can't demand that much more from the economy in a matter of revenue. So you push the revenue into a service where they're going to have to be a lot more aggressive than they need to be. So it's actually unfair to both the Revenue Service and taxpayers not to have a self-adjusting target.
And what does this do? Because numbers are sexy. When you hear 50 billion rand shortfall, you automatically think, okay, where could it have possibly gone, forgetting that it's a projected figure. And automatically we then assume that there's incapacity or somehow there's a problem within SARS. Why is what Professor Angle is saying important to that? The target should also automatically drop if it's not attainable based on the economic conditions.
Yeah, look, there are two things. Maybe from our side, we need to increase our capacity of education, so that South Africans are educated about these processes. My personal view is that some media people deliberately wanted to apportion a blame for whatever reasons. But I think if society was educated into how, like the professor is correctly explaining it, how these targets work, we don't have to have this conversation. In countries that are more advanced and the society understands this, since we don't have a conversation, because if you've got a place where you must get money, and the growth doesn't become what you anticipated, it inevitably you reduce your target, because SARS doesn't get money from nowhere. It gets money from the economy. Now, as Dr. Randall was saying on your screens, is that we know that the economy is doing badly. The imports are doing very, very badly. Unemployment is at its highest. Bonuses are paid at a very lower level. The financial sector, for instance, as part of the cream when it comes to pay as you earn, are down. The consumer confidence is down. The business confidence is down. Those factors inevitably makes us to collect less. When people have got less money in their pocket to spend, we can get our 14% from them, and that's the reality. And it doesn't matter who's running SARS. If whoever runs SARS, if those are the circumstances, those will be the outcome. Yeah,
and based on the developmental needs that South Africa has, because SARS, or I suppose the tax collection, is the easiest way of government to have some income stream to fulfill those aspirations. So do you think the reform on the tax, especially corporate tax, is a conversation to be had?
Well, look, I think the bottom line is you can change the numbers around, but there's still only so much revenue. So to start changing legislation, I really don't think that's where the issue is. Really, from 2000 on to about 2010, a lot of the legislation was changed. I was there at the Treasury at the time. What we did is we broadened the base to lower the rates, and you'll see that we're coming through in some of the statistical numbers SARS says. So you're trying to reverse the years of apartheid, where you had a narrow base and you were hitting it too hard, especially salaried workers. So there's been a lot of broadening the base legislatively. The challenge for SARS is to do something they've never been able to do, is to get more of the informal economy. Now, they're a lot better than the rest of Africa. So if you look at Kenya or Uganda, many of these guys, they don't have a 26% ratio. They have more like a 16, 18% ratio. So the Revenue Service is performing relatively well. But one of the problems we do have is we do have an informal economy that's large, and one of the worries is when the economy starts to dip, it isn't, not everybody goes out of the system completely. There's a fair amount of people that are informalizing. When they informalize, it's still showing up as some growth. But once they informalize, it becomes much harder for the Revenue Service to collect.
Do you agree that, I suppose, the low-hanging fruit would be to go after the informal sector? But I want to touch on the corporate tax and in comparison to other emerging or developing economies, whether we are at the benchmark that we should be, considering the value to corporate South Africa that is not necessarily commensurate with what is being reinvested.
Yeah, look, before the before the economic boom, company income tax used to be our biggest contributor by 26%. It dropped to 18%. And there are a lot of theories into it, but the research theory is that obviously the recession affected the business side very, very badly, and that's why there is underperformance. And now, as we speak in now, personal income tax is the leading one with 37%. So we rely so much on the 27. I mean, on the personal income tax. And the professor is also correct. So, and when I talk about efficiencies, there are certain things that we need to do with speed, because as we continue to collect, the fat gets smaller and smaller. And then we need to think in a complicated manner. And the areas that are very troublesome is what it refers to the cash economy, where people are literally using cash. We visited one country, one of the 2-3 countries have got systems where you can put a cash register. They've got a law where you put a cash register into the small companies, and when they run business, the cash register registered with Sars. So there are certain things that we need to do. I mean, the illicit financial flow and the base erosion and profit shifting. Very complex tax avoidance schemes. We committed 2 years ago that we are going to employ about 32 highly skilled chartered accountants. We can report that we have now recruited about 30 of them. But it becomes more complex because this big corporation can even hire more complex and pay them far better than you do. So those are the areas that we must tap into, because the original, I mean, the traditional fat is running out. We need to think completely out of the box. So those are the things that, if you look at our annual report that we took to Parliament, we are very clear about what are the things that we need to do to catch up with this 50
Yes,
billion.
and your response is you're saying that it's a very sophisticated, well-entrenched system of being able to get away with murder, so to speak, where there isn't even a paper trail or the accounting creativity. It just boggles the mind. How then does SARS, how are they enabled to collect money if legislation is being flouted?
Well, there are two things. You're talking about two separate groups. There's corporate, and then there's the informal cash economy. The informal cash economy, there ain't no accounting. There's no numbers. You just got to check the cash. And it's a completely different game. When you're talking about the big corporates, frankly, in our situation, we collect a fair amount out of our corporates. If you take a look at the Western world, you'll see their corporate tax base is somewhere between 8 and 10%. If you look at the rate, the corporate tax rate of 28%, our rate is relatively high. The U.S. is about to lower their rate to 20 and 22. UK, 2021. So everybody is dropping their corporate rate because generally you don't collect as much out of corporates. But because the economy is down, you're picking up a lot of there. They are working hard in transfer pricing. A lot of companies are reforming, but there are companies that are not reforming. So some guys are playing the game well and other guys are not. Now, it is very difficult on transfer pricing to pick up a lot of money for the guys because it's very, very fact intensive. But SARS has moved a lot in that area. I guess the real issue here again is you've got to have a bigger base. I don't know how much more. You might get some more money out of the big corporates, but I don't know if there's that much more left.
What does it say about Gauteng being the best compliant province in tax collection, with about 40% of women contributing to that in those demographics?
Yeah, it's great news. And the issue with tax is a bit complex, so it might be. One of the things that we must get as a country is a patriotic society, where those who earn better understand that in a progressive tax system, when you contribute more, you are helping the poor person. Because when the country becomes more and more unequal, even your wealth is not guaranteed, because there is a possibility of revolt from the poor. And some countries are already advanced, so you don't have to be chasing people to say pay. They understand that responsibility. And I suppose that the Gauteng people might have two options. Might have two reasons. One might be that, but the second one might be also that they're better educated. And perhaps maybe there is money in Gauteng, but we want to really appreciate that. I think one of the pillars of SARS, and it's another thing that we are working very hard on, is that we're saying our philosophy is to educate, service, and comply. So we must first educate you on how tax work, give you good service, and then the small ones that are naughty will deal with the compliance. And that model, we believe, is a model that is going to take South Africa very, very far. Because once you've got people who do it voluntarily, it costs you less to get the money. And that is the line that you want to take.
All right, just quickly explore other possible income revenue streams for SARS and the country by extension. Things like royalties for mining companies, etc. I'm not sure if that, I'm not a fundi, whether that exists and whether that's something to be investigated.
Look, I mean, when it comes to royalties, we already have them. And the royalty revenue is up. So the problem is our mining sector isn't that big anymore. So you're not going to get big chunks of money out of that. And one of the problems that you're having is you're trying to relabel the existing tax base. The money is money. People, you can relabel it, you can add it, you can adjust it. But changing the law isn't going to be very much. But you are right. What's going to happen is, where do we get the revenue? Because when we face February, no matter how hard SARS tries, government wants more revenue. And the real problem is government wants revenue to go up a lot more, and the base that we have isn't sustaining it. So the question is, where do you get it? So people talk about the VAT. I don't believe they're going to touch the VAT. There's no way this government's going to touch the VAT. But they might do things like eliminate zero ratings, like zero ratings on fuel. They might also go after individuals by getting rid of the medical credit. So you'll see a number of places, and even in the speech by the minister, he sort of talks about a carbon tax, he talks about a sugar tax. So you'll see some efforts to get money at the side. That will help him, but unfortunately, unless he gets some real growth, the only place is to get a little better enforcement in the Gauteng area in Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. He'll get maybe a few billion out of that, but not what he needs. He can try to get the informal sector. That's not easy either. But the real problem is you're not growing enough. You're simply not growing enough.
Do we have a ballpark figure as to what is potentially due to SARS if you had the capacity to deal with issues of the cash-based economy and cash flow or illicit cash flows?
Yeah, you know, for instance, we've got about 70 billion rand of debt. That is, so we've got 160 billion rand of debt. 70% of, I mean, 70 billion of which is not disputed. So there is a big opportunity there. But the problem is that when the economy is doing so badly, to get people to pay taxes, you know, combined with other things, you know, you tend to struggle a lot. So your compliance becomes complex, because then people don't have money, they don't pay the money. I mean, they don't pay the money back. The other area that you are focusing on, and I think it's an area that you must teach our people, because then now we're accused of refunds or of holding refund, is that there is high levels of corruption within the VAT refunds. In the last 2 years, with our risk engine, we're able to stop 35 billion rand that could have been lost to the fiscal. So this 50 billion rand could have been 85 billion rand if we didn't have the system that we put. But the problem is that it's like a traffic cop. So as you're trying to stop the naughty one, you also disturb the good ones, and the good ones start to complain. And when they complain, you become a bad guy. So one of the things that you must really talk about is, and we believe that, by the way, we can even stop more. You know, the risk engine must be modernized. You get a company that registered this year, the following year they want to demand a very huge refunds. The diesel side, the diesel refunds, there are issues there. But also from our side, there are other areas that you must venture. I mean, one of the things we've just done quick research now, where we find money, is the game. Is it, you call it the game? The gaming. Yes, okay. where people are selling buffaloes and this expensive.
Yeah.
That is a very, very funny area. So people will sell an animal like a buffalo, and then later on declare debt and whatever. So there are still areas where there is deliberate acts of avoiding the taxes. So where we are now with what Commissioner Moyan is wants is for us to enter into areas that we didn't enter before. So it's no longer excited about.
Now you're going to conservation as well.
Yes, we get into everywhere where we need to get. We need. So we're broadening our scope, if you like. But it comes with a lot of things. I mean, I'll give you an example. We got a letter from Treasury to say, guys, we might take 1 billion rand from your budget because they need money. And then when that cut our resources, it affects us to collect. So it's a spaghetti thing. But the intention really is all South Africans must see paying tax as the most important thing to do to take this country forward.
But other than that, I mean, congratulations are in order, and we do hope that the economy will improve and that we'll have an upward trajectory. But in the absence of that, taxes still have to be collected. And unfortunately, when life does happen in terms of retrenchments, etc., people are not able to do so. They then rely on the state again for unemployment fund, etc. In your view, I mean, what else needs to be done as a stimulus to the economy? We've heard about the policy uncertainty, which has been refuted on so many platforms, that this is a conducive environment for business in South Africa.
Well, I think there's a big issue about that. That's a whole separate battle. The bottom line is who you're backing in the politics. So if you're backing one side, you don't like the other side. So this is going on. And right now, whatever side you have, whenever you see uncertainty, it can be in any country. Look at the UK with Brexit. There's uncertainty. Right now, we are living definitely with uncertainty, whether you like it or not. You might like one side, may like another, but there is some definite uncertainty out there. Look, the economy's got to grow, and people have to feel that it's a friendly environment to grow. That's the bottom line, and there's a feeling, there's a narrative that there's a problem there. But leaving the growth issue aside, I think one of the issues that's there for SARS is this thing called the risk engine. Now, there are a number of issues that the current commissioner is caught with that they're saying that he has done this wrong. But I've been around a long time, and a lot of these issues have been festering way before. And a number of people have been unhappy about things way before. And the moment they now have a narrative to attach to, now they can jump in. So it's unfair, but the issue of the risk engine is one of the biggest challenges that SARS has, and it has across Africa, actually.
Gentlemen, that's all the time we have. Thanks indeed, and congratulations to you, the team, and Commissioner Tom Moyane. And thanks so much, Professor Keith Engel, CEO of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals, and Luther Lebelo is South African Revenue Services Group Executive Employee Relations. And thanks for staying with us. And on to other news. Small businesses need more support to help them survive the tough economic times. Minister of Small Business Development, Lindiwe Zulu, says small, medium and micro enterprises will be redirected to successful sectors to give them a lifeline. She was presenting the status report on her department's performance this year. Minister Zulu says that it was important to promote access to economic opportunity for historically marginalized individuals.
Since 2014, Q3, South Africa's gross domestic product, GDP, has been on a steady decline. And every time it declines, and it has a really negative impact on SMMEs. And I think that's one of the reasons why, for instance, the president had to call all ministers in the economic cluster and say to us, what are you going to do to assist in changing this state of affairs from an economic point of view? Aware of what the mandate of the department is to lead an integrated approach to promotion and development of small business and cooperatives. And SMMEs and cooperatives can be the main drivers of economic growth, poverty reduction and job creation.
If you just think about buying local, savings, and growing your own food are simple things that citizens can do. Why must we go and buy imported clothing, the brands? I just bought some lovely outfits. In fact, at that cocktail of my granddaughter's, I bought from a local designer. It was so much cheaper and very indigenous and cute. And if we begin to do that more often, you then grow the small business. As Minister said earlier, the more small businesses we grow, and they can become sustainable, and they then make enough money so that they can begin to pay tax. It increases the revenue that is available for the state to do its work.
The department, having reflected on the progress they've made since their inception 3 years ago, with initiatives such as the Gazelles Project and working with students to inspire entrepreneurial spirit, they will now turn their attention to amending and updating the Small Businesses Act. Valerie Robinson, ANN7, Pretoria.
Do stay with us. Just after the break, the latest news and sport update.